Welcome to Real Talk Food Safety with Jill and Tia. We are so happy to have you with us today.
Yes, hello everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, to wherever you are today. Today I feel pretty good about this Wednesday. I think it's because we're really ticking down to the holidays.
I think so. And we've had a really full schedule the past couple months. And while it's still full, it feels nice to have some major things that we've accomplished, that we've kind of closed, and that like are ready for the next thing. So
Yes.
I agree to you. Today, I'm feeling like it's like, the day before you go on vacation.
Yes, yes,
It's that type of feeling. Does
yes.
anybody out there know what we're talking about? That feeling where it's like the day before vacation and you're like, nothing's going to be a problem today.
Right, exactly. And honestly, this is the best time to have like a real talk, right? Because and it's what we set up for in this LinkedIn Live. And the reason why we come to you every week is because this was just really time for us to talk about what's going on, how we feel about it, how's it impacting our organizations, how's it impacting us, how it's impacting food safety culture. And if you've been on our show as a guest, we don't do a lot of prep for the calls. And it's not because it's not because it's like we don't want to or we run out of time. It's really because, well, it is because we don't want to. And we want it to be a conversation and we want it to really be that real talk. So we
Yeah.
don't do a lot of prep other than what's the topic and how we might flow through it. But we like for this to be a conversation.
Yeah. And you've probably picked up on that because we kind of weave back and forth. And sometimes we even get a little off track
Yeah.
but that's okay. Because I think that's the whole reason we do this, because we don't want it to just be a presentation or like talking at you. Like that's so like what was the contract that Mercer had? We've been talking about the Mercer report.
Yeah, like
That was like, oh, the old loyalty contract.
right,
Yeah,
right.
we are totally into the well-being lifestyle contract era.
Hmm. Absolutely. And this is like well-being for us too, where we just
Mhm.
have an hour with you all to talk about what's top of mind in food
Mhm.
safety.
Yeah, and what's been coming up. So we
Mhm.
don't just like magically like go, wow, this is our schedule of real talks for the year and the topics.
Yeah.
They typically relate around one, when our guests are available, but the other
Mhm.
one is like, what have we seen that's been bubbling up that we, need to talk about?
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. And a lot of times it's coming from you guys. What are
mhm.
you posting on LinkedIn? What questions are you asking us? What emails are you sending? We always share our emails at the very end, right? Because we love to hear your ideas. We love to hear what you have going on and how we can help you.
Yeah. And so even as we get started, we'd love to do the where in the world are you and
Mhm.
what's it like? Yesterday, we got dumped with that snowstorm that's coming through the US.
Ooh, really?
Oh my gosh. Yeah, it's like winter wonderland, like where all the trees are heavy with snow, even like the little weeds, like they all have snow piled up. And
Yeah.
yeah, like I go to let the dog out in the morning and she's bolts out the door and stops.
Oh my gosh.
So she's like, what happened overnight?
Oh my goodness. You know what? I haven't even looked at, I mean, we don't have any snow here in Baltimore, but I didn't even look to see like where that storm is going and if we're going to get some tail ends. I don't think so because I was actually talking to someone. Joy, if you're out there, say hello. I was actually talking to her and she's in Maine and she was saying that it was snowy and windy there. So maybe it's kind of kept going north. And sometimes I forget where you are is so far north compared to like where Baltimore sits.
We are north, but that's okay. I love it. It's wonderful. And the most interesting part is my entire family is home today with me.
Ah,
So we're all in our own corners with, virtual school and, my husband's doing work. He's in the kitchen. The kids are in the one space, all of that. So
yeah, yeah. Well, fun. And I love looking at snow and I know it's beautiful up there.
it is. So yeah, as you're joining us, tell us where you are and give us the weather check. So
Yes, absolutely.
yes.
What are we talking about today, Jill?
Well, I just put it up. Rules of engagement.
Yes. And we love this topic. And again, this just comes up from the conversations that we have with others. But when we think about teamwork, rules of engagement is really important, right?
It is. And, I think we take for granted that we all kind of operate under the same system, or we have
Mhm.
standing meetings where it gives us a sense of how we're supposed to show up and what we're supposed to cover. But I always find it interesting, even for teams that have worked together for a while. Sometimes the friction that comes up is because we're not on the same page of the rules of engagement.
Yeah. And when you take a look at teams that you've been a part, so like think of teams right now that worked so well, or teams that did not work so well. It's
Mhm.
because there weren't really any rules of engagement. And a lot of people feel like that the teams that you're on, that it just happens to be that way. But even as we were thinking about this topic, and we'll get into it a little bit more, but really to develop these rules of engagement, it has to be intentional
Mhm.
and you have to do it in order for your team to be productive and work well together and not have these areas of conflict or friction.
Mhm.
And a lot of people feel like, oh, well, rules of engagement, we haven't talked about it, but we just fit. But if you think back to when this team was being formed or you joined an existing team, there were some rules of engagement that was given to you. And it might be that, hey, we meet at this time and these are the things we talk about. And this is when you talk about these things. And this is how we discuss and how we come to a common agreement. Like those things are so important for a team to be productive.
Mhm. But I also think it goes to another layer. And sometimes people think that our rules of engagement are linked to values of our organization. They might be, but I think it goes even further. So, for example, gosh, it can be things like when I was leading teams, one of the rules of engagement for our team was that we always need to know before others,
Yep.
right? For us to be a team that can support everybody, like as part of our communication with each other and that building trust and belonging, like we need to know so that we can support and have each other's back.
Yes. Yes.
But if we find out, hours later, days later, that puts us in a really hard spot to be able to be seen as a cohesive, like one voice for food safety and quality.
That's a really good example because a lot of people say, oh, my boss wants to know that, right? That's the first thing as a leader or as a manager, you're telling your team, like, hey, I need to find out before the plant manager finds out, or
Mhm.
before our director finds out, or before the CEO finds out. But that is a rule of engagement, right?
Mhm.
And I love the way you put it, Jill, where it's not even just you and your manager, right? You and
Mhm.
the leader. It's also within the team,
Mhm.
right? So that your whole team is on board or at least know what's
Mhm.
going on so they don't find out from someone else or someone comes and asks them questions,
Yeah.
right?
And that was at a time where we were really focused on the consistency that we were delivering. We were coming out of a time period where everybody kind of operated under their own rules. They were like their own autonomous facility. We are like, the only way for us to get better corporately together is if we have a united front that we show.
Mm-hmm.
So I think
Yeah.
that's definitely one, but I think, even other ones that I've seen come up are things like everybody speaks at every meeting,
Yeah.
which some people go, "Well, that should be so easy." But it's not always. There's some people who maybe aren't as comfortable
Mm-hmm.
or are more introverted, so they may sit back. And it doesn't mean that we have to have an answer from them right away, but even for them to say, I'd like a little more time to think about this.
Yes. Yes.
But somehow to make sure everybody's voice is heard.
Mm-hmm. And as a leader, if you are leading a group of people, whether directly or indirectly, if you are leading projects or you're leading food safety and quality in your organization and you're working with your cross-functional team, it's important that as we go through this episode of Real Talk that you think about, like, how do I take that back and make sure that these things are happening in my team? Like
Mhm.
when Jill talks about like everyone gets to speak, right? If you're sitting and you're the leader of a meeting of this team, and you're realizing that everyone it doesn't have the opportunity to speak, whether or not whatever it is, right? Like maybe someone else is super passionate about it, or
Mhm.
someone else is just a little quiet today. Making sure you say, hey, Jill, did you have anything to add to this? You as a leader being able to take command of the space, right, and lead in that way. We want you to think about that as we go
Mhm.
through how to set up and what things to think about as you put together your rules of engagement.
Yeah. And I think the important part too is that when we talk about like, well, why is it so important? And we all know that high performing teams perform better, right? We're
Yeah.
more productive, we're more efficient. But here's the other part. And I have the reference somewhere for this, but highly engaged teams show a 21% increase in profitability for an
Mhm.
organization. That's huge.
Yes.
Like, I don't need to sell more product. I don't necessarily need to get more customers. I just need to have more highly engaged teams to be more profitable.
Yes.
Dang.
That's like, wow, right?
That's money sitting on the table that we just need to like capture.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I love that stat. I love it when we have these stats, right? Because it helps people connect the quote unquote softer skills or
Mhm.
leadership skills or emotional intelligence to what you traditionally think an organization is there for. Like you said, that's just money on the table if you don't invest in your leaders to be able to lead in this way, right? And have your leaders be able to put in rules of engagement and able to manage that, right?
Mhm.
Like you're just leaving that on the table, and you're leaving that possibility of that leader growing if you're not doing that type of investment.
Well, I think, Tia, you're always a really great advocate for how do we make sure our food safety quality teams and leaders are integrated and trusted business partners? Well, this
Yes.
is one way, right?
Yes.
When we show that we can help make money, we can save money, we see the inefficiencies. These
Hmm.
are things that help them go, oh, they're actually more concerned about things than just food safety and quality,
Yes. Yes.
right? They're concerned
Exactly.
about the bottom line, and that's important to me because that's my KPI too.
Hmm. Hmm. And I truly believe that us as food safety and quality leaders and professionals, we that has to be a part of our role, right? Like we have to be thinking about it in that way, because we need to be those trusted business partners to help minimize the risk.
Hmm. Yeah. And so if you are new joining us and we've already like started in on rules of engagement, but we are Jill and Tia, and we are your go-to resource for technical leadership development. We are the only solution that has coaching-based programs that are designed just for us in technical areas to be better leaders. And we've done that because we've been in your shoes. We have looked for leadership programs that helped us be better leaders. And guess what? We didn't find them. We found leadership generic ones that, they had good concepts, but they weren't relatable and practical enough for what we did. And so
Yeah.
Tia and I said, enough of that. We are going to create one so that we can all collectively be better leaders together. So
Yeah.
we're thrilled to have you here as we talk a little bit about this aspect of being a better leader.
Yes, absolutely. Because, and this is a good example of really taking a leadership principle of understanding the rules of engagement with your team and really applying it to what we do, right? So,
Mhm.
the examples that we've already given, and we're going to dive even more into, is reasons why, specifically in food safety and quality, right? Like we need to have rules of engagement so that we can really work with other teams, right, and
Mhm.
other functions, so that we can be those trusted business partners, so that we can help find savings and increase profitability for us to be able to lead the organization and help them understand the risk. That's very specific to what we're doing,
Mhm.
in ways that you can apply some of these leadership principles. So that's what we
Yeah.
do.
So as we get started, I first want to do a shout out. Claire, it's great to have
Hi,
you with us.
Claire.
I know you're here like week after week, and we love that you join us. And looks like you're in Oklahoma City, but head to New York City.
Yes.
Tia, right? She's always feeling that vibe.
Oh, I love New York City. It is my favorite city. Really, it's my favorite city in the world. And so, I've been to London, I've been to Tokyo, and people are like, "Oh, I don't know." New York is still the top of my list. So,
Oh,
I hope you have fun in New York City.
yeah. And for everybody out there, I'd love to know, like, do you have rules of engagement?
Yeah.
Drop a yes or a no in the comments and let us know. Do you have any?
Yeah. And when we go through rules of engagement, like put your questions, put your comments, put your perspectives into the comments because we see them and we will incorporate them into today's show.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about, why rules of engagement is so important, right? It's really around, making sure that you have the right type of teamwork, that you increase that profitability, and that your team is really more productive, have less friction, and you'll be able to reach those solutions faster, which is really the hand in hand with the profitability, right? Like
Mhm.
you're able to find those savings, you're able to get to those solutions faster because your team is working so well together.
Yeah. And I think the logical place to start is like why we need them.
Hmm.
And we always talk about mindset and how we show up is so important.
Yeah.
And I
Yeah.
think that's the first one.
Yeah, I think so. It's really understanding how we want to show up together.
Mhm. Back in the day, once again, I'll use the example when we were trying to have consistency across our facilities. One of the things we put into play was the way that we show up is that we are the face of food safety.
Mm.
And what does that mean? And really, it was about having something that prompted us to think about how we want to look. Those are the things like we wanted to be a united front. We wanted to be our first team so that we could really support each other. We wanted to be unstoppable. We wanted to make a lot of impact. We also wanted to be very known as like collaborative. And we wanted to be seen
Mhm.
as problem solvers. And all of those things and more kind of went into this face of food safety so that we could
Yes.
aspire to be there and move towards it.
Yes, yes. I love that because I would love to hear from you all too on like does that sound familiar? Like when you thought about rules of engagement, you're thinking, no, we've never done that. But when you talk about like we want to be the problem solvers, we want to be collaborative, we want people to come to us, right? Versus staying away from us or shying away from food safety and quality. Those are the rules of engagement. That's how you want to show up together. That's what you want people to think about when they hear, oh, food safety and quality is coming to the meeting, or even Jill's going to be there. Oh, this is what Jill represents, right? Like, and she's able to also represent the broader team because you guys are so in line with one another.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that. I like that.
Well, it's important because, right, in our roles, we often will even have dotted line reporting structures.
Yeah.
And because we're so interactive and collaborative with other areas, sometimes, like for example, right, like when we had folks who were stationed in a facility, in a manufacturing facility, that team is a very close-knit team, which is
Hmm.
awesome. But we also wanted the teams, like the team across the facilities and with corporate, to be strong.
Yeah.
And so those were things that we talked about, like how is it and how does it need to be so that we can be collectively consistent across everywhere?
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and really thinking about like that team structure, and when you say, okay, the team needs to know first
Mhm.
who's a part of that group. And sometimes it is your dotted line structure, right? Like, I've been in a structure where the quality manager reported into the plant manager,
Mm.
but there's a dotted line to the corporate director. We don't want our corporate director to find out from that plant manager, right? And we don't want the plant manager to find out that something's happening in his facility that he doesn't know anything about, right? So sometimes it's like, well, that plant manager, depending on if that director is going to be involved, that he also knows about
Mhm.
what's going on, right?
Yep.
And so really understanding, who do we want to be as a food safety team? Who do we want to be as a plant leadership team? Who do we want to be as a corporate team, right? So like think about all these groups that you may be a part of or the group that you're representing. How do you want to show up as that group,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
I think, oh,
Go
go
ahead.
ahead. Well, I was going to say that I think too, like as you think about how you want to show up, and we truly believe that you need to have these conversations, like
Mhm.
intentionally have these conversations and set up time to talk about it. When you are developing your rules of engagement, I think it's really important for you to talk about like what each other's strengths and opportunities and pet peeves are. And,
Mhm.
I like to think about it as like lines that people won't cross. Or, sometimes I think about it we know food safety and quality, right? Like sometimes people are like, okay, yep, I can lean into risk a little bit more here. In some areas, you might not want to lean into risk. And each of us are different,
Mhm.
right? Each of us are different. We have our own risk tolerance. That's important to get out in the open because you're working on a team. And so
Mhm.
you're going to have to collaborate. And there's going to be times that you are going to have to lean in to being uncomfortable or choosing a different path that if it was just you alone, maybe you would have chosen a different path. And so when you're coming up with the rules of engagement, I think it's important to say that, hey, like, this is a huge pet peeve for mine. So I don't want to lean into risk here.
Mm.
Or, I like to think about it like where some people are like, you know what, everything needs to have a color code. Like they just like everything needs to have a color code. And white must always be food contact. Like that's just the way I think about it. That's the way it is, and that's something that you need to bring to your group, because if someone's like, well, food contact for me has always been blue, and then it's like, then you're having those conversations and you're aligning on, okay, well, Tia is a stickler for white food contact. That's what we're going to do as a team, right?
Mhm.
Because someone's super passionate about it. And I know this might be a silly example, but there's
Well,
things that are like that where people are like, this makes sense in my mind, and it's hard for me to transition out of this. I'm going to either need help to get to where we need to be because maybe multiple people are passionate about it, or everyone's like, yep, Tia, that's fine. If you're super passionate about that, then that's how we're going to show up as an organization.
yeah. Well, and I think the bigger part is that you bring up when I think of rules of engagement, it's like how to have that conversation.
Yeah.
Because I think a lot of times someone might just, I've seen people like put the stick in the sand and be like, I'm not budging. Okay. But that doesn't help us move forward collectively.
Mm-hmm.
So I think even the rules of engagement of like, we're going to talk about all these things, but at the end, we're going to walk out of this meeting or this space together. And even though you may be like, well, I really wanted it to be blue, that is not the message that you will
Right.
ever speak or utter outside this room. And if you
Absolutely.
if you want to come back and revisit it, the rules of our engagement are you can, but it comes to this team first.
Right.
You can
Exactly.
see I spent a lot of time on rules of engagement.
But you know what? I love it because, I didn't even think about this as like a rules of engagement when I worked so well. There's one team in my mind that we used to say we're lockstep. Like
Mm.
everything outside of our weekly meeting, once we go out, we are hand in hand. And there was
Yes.
a history on why we needed to be that way. And it's because if someone doesn't like the answer that Jill gives, they're going to come to Tia, and then they might go to Claire, and they might go to other people, right, to try to find an answer. And so if we're not lockstep, that's going to create issues that we're going to have to solve out. And one or more of us are going to have to backtrack, right?
Yeah.
So we don't want to do that. And so that forced us to say, okay, what are we going to say when we leave this room? And what is the message we're going to communicate to everyone?
Yeah.
And I didn't think about it as rules of engagement until we started talking about it with
Mhm.
Catalyst, where I'm like, wow, that's why that team worked so well. It's because we had all the conversations, right? And a part of that rules for engagement, how are you having those conversations? Right? It's like we know each other, we're respectful, we listen to everyone there, we make sure that everyone is heard. All of those pieces are in there. And then once we get out, whether or not it was your idea or not your idea, or you were part, once we left the room, that's the message that we're communicating. And it just works so well.
It does, and I think those are the things that we believe. I think I'm gonna say it's kind of the, like, osmotic or tribal knowledge thing that we think people will just pick up on and know
Yeah.
and be able to participate in, but the answer is no. If we're
Hmm.
going to assume that we all know the rules of engagement, then guess what? We're gonna feel the pain of that.
Yeah.
And so I think
Yeah.
that's why it's so important to put together, like, how we show up together,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
And I think you hit on a good point on like communicating that to new members of the team.
Yeah.
And a lot of people think about it. where it's like, okay, I have this mentee that I need to communicate to and make sure that they're prepped for it. Right. But you should be doing that for every new member of the team.
And
When I
reviewing it regularly within the
think,
team.
yes, absolutely. When I think about the strong team that I was on, when someone new joined, I remember having conversations with this person. They were actually new to their career. They had been in another group that operated a little differently. And so when they came over, one of the things that I said to them is that this team works a little differently in the way that we have to be aligned on what we say. So if you're not sure if we're aligned, it's completely okay to say, hey, let me get back to you. Because if you say something, then we all have to align to that, because that's the rules of engagement. Yeah. And I remember having that conversation when they first entered, and I told them, like, this is new and different than the role that you came from, because it almost feels like, can I make decisions independently? And it's like, you can make decisions independently. Just know we have to back that up, right? Because so if you think is the right thing to do, right, we want you to say, yep, this is what we do, right? But we want to encourage you to know all aspects of the facility, not just your area, so you can make that decision.
Yeah.
And so that was something that we spent time on. We talk about onboarding all the time, right? Onboarding that person into the new role and to the team, that's a part of onboarding. Learn other areas so that you can make those decisions, because our rules are we back up what we say. And if you say it for your area, that's what we're doing across the facility, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think it also applies to like how we get work done together. So even as we talk about these rules of engagement, so for example, when we've had stand-up meetings, some of the rules of engagement, they apply a little bit differently, perhaps in different situations. Yeah. In our stand-up, everybody had to be on time and there every day. If you couldn't, you were responsible to have a representative who could speak to the things that we did in our stand-up. Yeah. But it had to start on time because they were short.
They were
quick. And we wanted your voice to be there.
Yeah.
But when we did other meetings, so we had a series like where we did daily stand-up meetings. We also would have things like every other week where we needed to get more in depth about something.
Right. Yeah.
But once again, very structured. Okay, if you were a little late to that, like it's okay. But so the timing, like being late, wasn't quite as important in that one.
Right.
There can be differences in that. But we also did things like I think it was every other month. We used to do like, this was pre-COVID. We used to do where we'd all get together and we would go to eat. We would rotate through our facilities, and that person who was the manager there had to like host us.
Ooh.
So we did these different rules of engagement depending on where we were, and we wanted to include everybody. And there were different parts. And I think that's important to consider when you think about how is it that we want to get work done together? Because it may look a little different depending on what the purpose of perhaps your meeting or your gathering is.
Yeah. Yeah. And who's in the meeting, right? So it's even something where, if there's a team this is a meeting that you have with corporate, and what you talk about in that meeting might look a little different, right? It might be different than what you talk about in your stand-ups and how much detail you go into, and how you capture, right? How you capture what happens in those meetings in the follow-ups. So how you get work done together, and when you think about the rules of engagement, that probably will change based off of those avenues.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which kind of takes us to the next part, because people often will say, well, okay, I'm not familiar really with rules of engagement. So like, how would we even do this? How do we even know? How do we put it together?
Yeah. I think the very first thing that comes to mind, and I mentioned it before, but it's really around being intentional about creating them. Set up dedicated time with your team to talk through the rules of engagement. And like Jill mentioned, you probably want to do this at a frequency, right? And as your team change, right? Like as someone new comes in, how do you bring them into the rules of engagement, but also get their perspective around it? Because they might have a different outlook on some of the rules or might have additional rules to add, right? Because of their experience and their personality and how they like to lead and interact with others. So I would say, number one, you have to be intentional about it. You can't just allow it to come to you when it may, because it's not going to happen.
It won't. In fact, I would even recommend that you ask specific questions for the whole group. Things like, what do you notice that we do when things seem to go well?
Yes.
Right? What do you notice? And see, what do people see? Is it like, oh, hey, we're all here on time, we're all present, we're all doing this, versus, okay, what do you notice when we're not getting things done and we're not getting along? Is that when everybody's like on their phone or trying to check an email, or people are showing up late? I mean, there's a whole variety of things, but those two questions alone can help you start putting those things in play. And you may even kind of prep for it by letting your groups know, like, hey, the next time we get together, start thinking about this, because this is what we're going to talk about for the first 10 minutes.
Yes. I love that. And I love the idea, or really the recommendation, or it's really a requirement, that it really does take your whole group to be a part of it. So it's not just you as a leader, what do you notice? It's really how each of you, what do you feel in these situations? When do you feel your best in these situations? When do you feel like the meeting has gone well from your perspective? Making sure that each person is allowed to think about it and express those things.
Well, and even along with that, right, part of that brings up what we noticed when we had the standard weekly meeting was we never really got anything done. And sometimes people didn't show up. So that in itself helped us at the time to restructure, to say, oh, okay, if this isn't working, what else do we need to do? And how do we structure these different gatherings so we're more effective? But it took the whole group to be there.
Yeah. I love that, because that's something that we notice. If we have a group and half the team is missing for whatever reason, we didn't have the best of meeting, right? We weren't able to make the decision, because how we wanted to show up is that we're all aligned. If half the group's missing, then we couldn't get that alignment.
And I think it's okay as a leader to come with some examples of things that may spark people to explore and be curious. Because at times, so for example, one that might apply now, because right, we have this hybrid type workspace or even work from home. Like, what does that look like for your team? Like, is everybody supposed to be available 24/7, 365? Or is it one day a week, this is what happens? Or, those type of things like are good to talk about.
And align on, right?
Absolutely.
I think, like, as you look to create these rules of engagement, it's also okay to be flexible and modify them as you use them. And I think this is around also just being intentional, where you set up intentional time to talk about it and align on them, but also knowing that as you practice them, as you work within your rules of engagement, that you may need to modify them, because we learn, right? But then also we change as leaders and as individuals, because we're growing, right? We're having different experiences. We're growing, hopefully, in our leadership and in our technical knowledge. And it's okay to modify your rules of engagement to fit your team, because the goal is that your team is productive and there's less conflict and friction, so that you can make decisions.
Yeah. And, it's not always, I didn't understand this concept until I had somebody else introduce it to me and give me some examples of like, well, what would this look like? And how do I, as a leader, develop them? How do I engage my team to help develop them?
Yes.
And so this is a brand new concept for you. Of course, we're going to say, well, get some help.
Yeah. Yes.
There are people out there who have done it. And of course, this is part of what Tia and I do on a regular basis is helping teams have better like team dynamics. And some of that is through rules of engagement.
Absolutely. And I'm the same way, Jill, where I didn't think about this until it really came up. And someone introduced that, hey, you should have some rules of engagement. And if I didn't have that help or partner to really think through these things, then, I think I would have missed it. Right. Like I didn't even think about it in terms of like, these are rules of engagement with my really strong team. But even as I look to model in other teams where we're trying to build that engagement, and it wasn't packaged in the way of rules of engagement, but it's more like, how do you want to show up as a team?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, once again, if we're all on the same page of this is how we work together and this is what we're going to be doing, like that just paves the way for us to have way more success than the bumpy road that we sometimes have.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean all the bumps go away, but it means it's probably going to be less rocky.
Right. Exactly. So how do we consistently use rules of engagement? So we kind of talked about why they're important and some examples around it, but how do we consistently be in that space?
Well, one thing I'm going to start with is that we need to have commitment. Because, and this can, I mean, it may sound silly, but it can even be as much as like we sign the sheet together type thing.
Yeah.
But somehow people have to be able to connect to say, yes, I will agree to follow these. If it's, I take an oath, whichever hand that is, make it something kind of fun so people are excited to be like part of it.
Yes.
But something that really shows like together, we are going to be committed to following these rules of engagement until we collectively decide to do it differently.
Yes.
Because if we don't, then people won't bring it in, right? They'll think, oh, that applies for Tia, but Jill does it I do it this way.
Right. Exactly. It's true. And I think sometimes we skip that commitment stage, right? Like everyone's kind of thinking in their head, yeah, this sounds great. Maybe I'll do it. Maybe I won't. And then you're like, you know what, Jill, I want that commitment from you. Are you committed? Tia, are you committed? And being able to say, yes, I am committed to this process. I'm committed to following the rules of engagement. That's when it becomes real, right? And people get out of their head thinking it's not me. Now it's like, nope, I've written, right? I've committed to my group and I've said it and I've signed it and whatever you do to show that commitment, that's important.
Yeah. And I love that the stage of going past just a verbal yes, because sometimes that yes is without commitment because we're just part of the group. We're gonna be like, yep, sure, I'll do it.
Right. Yes.
There's no intention behind that to actually participate and be I'm going to call it a citizen of the community following those rules. So we need people to do that next step to say, I am going to be a responsible citizen in this group, a responsible team member. And so we need them to do more than just the yes sometimes.
Right, exactly. It's more around like, yes, I am committed to being a part of this team. And, I think that also pushes into I'm going to do my part, right? So the days that I'm grouchy, the days that I don't feel that great, the days that I'm like, I don't even know if I want to contribute to the team, that you're committed, right? You're committed to this team and you show up even on those days. And maybe the part of your rules of engagement is that, hey, if you're having a bad day, then you communicate in this way, this, whatever it happens to be for your group, to let them know that, hey, like today my mind is everywhere. We had a bad audit or, someone put in their resignation today, or, I have personal things going on in my life. Whatever it is, you're communicating that, hey, like today I want to be a listener, or today I need a little bit of time, or maybe this topic is too big. I'm not ready to talk about it. How do I push off to the next week or the next time we connect? That is still showing your commitment, even if you're like, okay, I'm not myself today. It's what can you do those extra steps to make sure that you are a part of the team?
Yeah. And I think along with that, because typically when we do come together, we're all coming from somewhere, right? Some of us are like, we're sliding in at the last minute. Some of us have been
Yeah.
like working on something and we're frustrated or there's something going on. And I
Yeah.
think that's a big part of why we advocate for rituals.
Mm-hmm.
Like when we get together, like what is the ritual that we do together to signify we've arrived? And
Yes.
even though we've got all this going on, we create a ritual. And sometimes that is like, well, like, let's acknowledge what's happening so that we can be fully present.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do a reset so that we understand we're together and what our rules of engagement are.
Yeah.
Um, there's so many different ways to do that, but I love rituals.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And it could just be acknowledging how we're feeling today.
Mhm.
Right. That's one thing that we've used as a ritual just in our group coaching is how are you showing up today? How are you feeling today? What's one word that describes, how you're showing up?
Yeah.
What do you want to get out of today? Even asking that question. So rituals are important it's something that happens with your brain, right? Like from like a scientific standpoint, is that when you develop these rituals, or like we even think about it as habits,
Mhm.
right? It sets your mind up for success. It
Yeah.
sets your mind that, hey, I'm here in this space and that's what I'm going to focus on today.
Yeah, and I love the ritual because it has another element that's even above a habit. Because right, a habit, like I
Mm-hmm.
think of my habit of like I'm driving to work, and it's the like I get there, and I'm like, dude, how did I get here today?
Oh, right.
My
Yes.
mind was somewhere else. So to me, a habit is like this autopilot, but a ritual is very intentional.
Mm-hmm.
Like we're going to
Agreed.
show up and we're doing these actions, doing whatever it is,
Agreed. Yes.
fully present.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
There was one when we talked about gratitude recently.
Yeah.
There was someone that had shared on a LinkedIn post that one of the things they do is their ritual is they start every meeting with sharing and celebrating like gratitude.
Yes. Which
Yeah,
we love that.
we do. So there's all these different ways that you can kind of set the stage for how you're going to incorporate your rules of engagement that
Yes.
honor how you want to be as a group and how you're going to do work together.
Yes. Yes. Absolutely.
Hmm.
Yeah. I love the idea of rituals. Another thing to consistently practice around rules of engagement is that when you're in the space and rules aren't being honored,
Mm,
how do you create an appropriate way to pause?
that's a good question. Right? Like, what is the flag? Is there some sign or some
Right.
word? Like, what is it that helps you pause to go, wow, I feel like you just ran right over my idea
Yeah.
or
Right.
whatever it is, but
Yes.
something to help us pause and go, I'm not sure we were committed to this in that moment.
Right, right, exactly. And it might be something in time, or it could be, you're coming to the meeting, you're kind of ticked off about something your
Mm,
teammate did, and it's brewing, right? How do you pause and say, you know what, something happened,
mhm.
and I don't think we were on the same page around communication. Can we debrief how that situation went, how I feel about the situation, and what we would do differently next time?
Mhm.
And making sure that there's forgiveness and trust and support. And really, I mean, I'm just calling out that psychological safety, right? To have and that's what really rules of engagement sets you up for, to
Mhm.
have that psychological safety that you can pause and say, something was off about the situation, or I don't think our rules of engagement were honored during this time. How do we get that back the next time that we go through a similar situation?
Mhm. Yeah, I think that's the important part that we often will, kind of steamroller over
Hmm.
because like we're always prepared to get on to the next thing, but yet we still need to like, how do we create some pause, closure, reflection, whatever we
Yeah.
want to call it, with where we're at. And that can be a really powerful part of our rules of engagement
Right.
because it just goes back to the whole if we do all this work to say this is how we want to show up together and
Hmm.
we're committed,
Yeah.
but yet on the other side, we don't do anything to kind of review and, you know, verify, right?
Yeah.
So we're all our science nerdy people. If we're not going to verify we're holding true and honoring these rules of engagement, then our cycle is broken.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we recommend like asking consistently at the end, how well did we honor our rules of engagement?
Hmm.
Like consistently asking that, because Jill, to your point, you're not going through all the busyness of the day and then you're moving on and you're never reviewing, did we show up the way that we wanted to,
Yeah.
right?
And once again, that can be easy. Like scale of 1 to 10, how well did we honor them?
Mm-hmm.
Or you could even insert one specifically, like how well did we honor everyone's voice was heard today?
Yeah.
What, but that it doesn't mean it's a big survey monkey survey or
Right.
something that you have to record or it doesn't have to be that, but it is meant to create that pause, like you said, so that we're really being intentional about, oh, how do I feel? Because if all of a sudden I'm only at like a 5 or a 3, that might be some good follow-up later. And it
Right.
might even be some good just self-reflection. Like if I
Mm-hmm.
feel that, did I say something?
Yes. Yes.
Because I think that's the other part. Like we're not just a passive actor in all of this. Right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I love that you brought that up, because it's ownership, right?
Mhm.
It's part of that commitment that I'm owning, that I'm going to show up in this group and that I am going to participate and I am going to be a part of the rules of engagement. Because there's a piece of that is that if I don't feel like we're being that we're honoring the rules of engagement, did I bring that up? Did I say that? Did I
Mhm.
communicate that? Or am I just letting that quote unquote go? Or am I going to take it from this room and seethe on it later?
Yeah.
Right. And that is, that leads to other problems of conflict and friction, right? And ultimately, you're not living up to your rules of engagement in that commitment.
Yeah. Right. We all have a part in this.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going to be committed, commit and
Mm-hmm.
then follow up.
Right. Exactly.
Mhm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I even like the point around like celebrating when they are honored. So if you ask yourself the question on a scale of 1 to 10, right? How do you feel we did? And you're at a 10, celebrate that,
Mhm.
you know?
Yeah. Right. There's so many different things. Oh gosh. And then as we talk about it, I'm like, oh, that's right. Remember all those little stuff like bacteria bugs that I
Oh
forgot who makes
yes.
them.
I love
I've
that.
even seen right where like there's one of those and it's like, hey, whoever like represented our rules the best or this best, like they got to carry the bug for the week or the day
Oh
or whatever
yeah.
it was. And so, right, sometimes these little cheesy things, like those are fun. Those are some of the recognition. Um, and playfulness that we can bring in, because rules of engagement aren't meant to be heavy and carry us down
No.
and constrain us. They're meant to help us like lighten our load, give us freedom, but also show some of the commitments and boundaries, or I might even say boundaries, that's not the right word, but I think things that we honor and respect so that we can work collectively better together.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. I think too, like thinking about it, like it doesn't have to be heavy. Like we did a couple of weeks back, we did a show on celebration, right?
Mhm.
Like that should be a part of your rules of engagement, if I do say so myself. But it's a part of like when you celebrate these, celebrate often, be consistent with that, because we know if you didn't hear that real talk, go back and take a look at it. Because we talked about how your brain changes when you celebrate.
Mhm.
And really the productivity, again, like this is helping with the productivity. It continues to increase when you spend time celebrating.
Yes. All right. So if we're going to say, like, what are the couple things that we want people to take away today?
Yes.
What's that going to be?
Yeah, I would say number one is be intentional about setting up time with your team to talk about and document how you want to show up together.
Mm, I like that because that's part of the don't assume that you're all on the same page.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah. And I would say then the commitment and reinforcement.
Mm-hmm.
like rituals,
Yeah.
like
I
how
love
to
it.
bring those in so they become part of how you do work together.
And that helps you be consistent, right? About following those rules of engagement.
Hmm. Yeah, if anything stands out, once again, for the audience, feel free to drop them in the chat because we're always curious. Like, what have you experienced? What works for
Mhm.
you? What's a new perspective or idea that you're taking away from today?
Yeah, absolutely.
Hmm.
One that I would add is around asking for help, right? So as you practice these rules of engagement, like there's going to be a bump in the road, right? And if you are, human, right? We have a tendency of saying, you know what, I'm going to get off this track because it's getting bumpy. Having a partner to help you stay on track, it can be so impactful to you as an individual and your team and how you communicate to others even outside of your team. So I would say, if you're finding that you're having trouble, or your team, every time there's a bump in the road, you can't quite get back on track, reach out to someone to help you. Obviously, we're in your network as Catalyst. And if we're not the right partner to help you, we will for sure connect you to someone that can. But get people in the boat with you, ask for help.
Yeah, because that 21% increased profitability that we talked about at the beginning, that is not monopoly money. That
No,
is real. That has been reported through numerous research firms.
yeah.
And I think the part that I think about is moving into this space, whether it's rules of engagement or high performing teams,
Mhm.
takes leadership,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if you yourself are working on how do I be more people first? How do I better develop my team? Here's our shameless plug. Technical Leader Bootcamp that starts January 26th is the key for you.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
These are the things that we talk about and help you prepare for. And like Jill said, it takes leadership. And sometimes we're pushed into leadership roles. Sometimes we need a reminder. Sometimes we just need to build that network of support. Technical Leader Bootcamp will help you get there.
Yep.
And we're excited about our January cohort as well.
Yes, we are. So we definitely want to hear if, what you thought of today and who's joining us for boot camp. So,
Yes, yes. Put a thumbs up in the chat or a hand
mhm.
raise,
Yep.
because we want you to join us.
Yep. Head on over to our website. It's foodsafetykatalyst.com and you can get more information there.
Absolutely.
Yes.
All right.
Awesome.
I
Well,
love
we hope that this was a good takeaway, right? On rules of engagement.
Yes, absolutely. And we love to share our emails, so I will get it up, where you can always reach out to us and say hello, to us, because we're here for you. We're here to support you in your leadership journey. And that's why we do this each and every week. And that's why you can find all of our videos on YouTube. So please check
Yeah.
out our YouTube channel and subscribe for us there as well.
Yeah. And next week is actually our last live show of the year, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It
Yes.
is.
So
Woo!
you will want to definitely tune in for the last show of our 2022 season. Because last week we're taking some time off and we hope you are too. So we're going to
Yes.
give you a link to a really great replay. But next week
Yes.
will be the last one and we can't wait to see you here again.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we'll see you next week, same time, 12 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Central. And we'll be here to talk.
We certainly will. All
All
right.
right.
Thanks
Thank you,
for joining
everyone.
us, everyone. Bye bye.
Bye.